They know that that is their future. They know that that is the person that's going to carry their bloodline, their name. So that's very important, and it used to be very important in all cultures. It's just that through slavery, a lot of American blacks have lost that, especially in the city part of it. In the country part of it, you still have a strong bond between black males and their children, their male children, because they see that same future. They see that same value of their name, their bloodline. But in the city, it has become critical, and it's getting to the point where most children, especially in the system, the DFAC system, don't even know their bloodline. They may not know their mother or their father. So they may not even know what their original name was when they were born. They may not have access to their birth certificate, their original medical records. So it's creating a sort of lost generation of children who have no idea not only where black people come from, but they don't even have the simplest of ideas of where they themselves came from just in their little lives. So we definitely work to help people and educate people on how to correct that problem. Fight for the information. If you adopt a child, fight for the information of that birth certificate. Fight for the information of that child's medical records from birth. Fight for the information of who that child's parents are. If you are really care for this child, then make sure that child knows their family, their mother, their father, their extended family. Even if their mother or father is a detriment to the child and you do not want them to be able to harm the child, make sure the child knows their maternal grandparents, their paternal grandparents, aunts, uncles, things like that. And you can make all of those visits completely supervised at all times. But you'll want to make sure they have that connection, because you won't really know the damage that is done from the emptiness in a child's heart of not knowing these things until the child gets around 13 through 16, when they start acting out because they have no basis. They're seeing these other events and different occurrences where other children are there with their auntie and uncle and all these different things, and it will start weighing on a child's heart around their teens, and you may not understand what is going on with them, especially when it comes to the lack of a father. Some children may just tell you, I don't care about my father, I don't care about knowing who he is, but that's what they're saying. But you have not really understand the impact of it until you see their eyes, their face, when there is a father-child event and they do not have their father in their life. And they don't even have to have their father in their life. They just need to have a father figure in their life. It can be their grandfather. It can be their uncle. It can be, the barber who says, I'll step in and do what needs to be done. So you really want to make sure that you are exposing them to all things that are more positive in their lives to counter some of the negative that is going to be definitely coming at them. And like I said, the main thing that we deal with, the majority of our time, 86% of our time, is actually based on developing solutions. And when it comes to developing solutions, that is something that must be the focus of every person who tells you that they are trying to make a change. Every organization out there that's talking about black folks need to do better and make a change and all this good stuff, if they're not spending 86% of their time at least on developing solutions, then you're in the wrong place. They're not going to get anything done. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to end up leaving. So make sure that you understand, if you're sitting somewhere and all they're doing is talking about the problem, and then you go back the next week and all they're doing is talking about the problem, stop going. stop sitting there, because it is a waste of time. There are plenty of organizations out there that actually get the job done. Every week they're out there, they're letting you know what happened that week. They're letting you know the solutions that they came up with. They're letting you know the things that were implemented, how it's working, tracking the success, the progress, all that good stuff. And that's the kind of organization you want to be a part of. Okay? So we are actually doing our first show here just for the Panther Party, because we've helped quite a few people get into radio over the past, years, and it's something that we get a lot of questions about, and instead of just relaying questions all the time and we answer them with the host, and the host go back and tell people what we said, we were asked to actually create our own vehicle so that people can ask us questions directly. And so while with the different programs that we have, we don't always have time to literally sit there and answer the questions ourselves, we have made the commitment to make time for at least a couple of hours a week for that, and we'll still spend the rest of the time giving the answers to the different hosts of the different television shows, radio shows, and internet radio shows. And we're going to go on to the next segment that we deal with. Of course, you know my segment that I love so much, which is history. And a lot of people talk about history, and blacks need to know their history, but they don't really understand how difficult it is for most people to really dissect and understand what it is that they're reading or even hearing when people are talking about black history. A lot of people mistake and infuse religion with history. So you have a lot of people that have become tricked or misguided into thinking that things like the Bible is the history of black people, and that could not be further from the truth. We know that in the Bible we had, back in the slavery days, that was the only book that plantation owners allowed was anybody to read to you. You weren't even allowed to read it yourself. Someone had to read it to you. It was called an indoctrination. You were read the same things over and over repeatedly. And what that was used to do, the book was actually intended to do, was to make slaves docile, to make them not want to do anything to upset their masters, their lords, their slave owners. There was a law created in most states, in most of the colonies, that plantation owners had to, by law, let their slaves, or force their slaves in some places, like Georgia, force their slaves to go down for 4 hours to 8 hours of indoctrination in the Christian religion. And with that, you would have a person up on the pulpit telling you that things like you cannot hate. So you would not hate the person that was doing all of these vile things to your family, your wife, your children, yourself. It told you that you could not have vengeance. Vengeance belonged to the Lord. So even though the people that were doing these things to you were very vengeful, the people that were teaching you these indoctrinations, anytime something happened to their family, the whites would gather up a whole gang of whites and go out to seek revenge. They would come back on Sunday and tell the black population, well, no, you don't do that. You basically just wait for God to take care of us for doing these things to you. And unfortunately, many blacks did exactly that. They now, to this day, they do not actually get upset or do anything about the things that are done to them and their families. They basically just say, well, I forgive the person who, molested my child. I forgive the person who killed my father. I forgive the person who raped my mother, and I'll let God take care of them. That indoctrination is still planted and has been bred into their children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. So it's an indoctrination that black people, especially black historians, must counter, must turn around if black people are ever to become what they were before they were slaves. So in our history segment, we deal with the origin of black people as far back as we can remember. You may not even be able to say, well, what started the war between good and evil. You may not have that information yet, but just because you don't have that information doesn't mean that you don't put the other pieces of the puzzle together that you do have. So in order to understand black history, what we do is we teach it to the different generations, grandparents, parents, college students, teens, and toddlers. And we teach it to them in a way in the Black Panther Party where they have a 10,000-piece puzzle, black history puzzle, laying out on a table. And there are pieces to the puzzle that you may not be able to piece together yet. But the ones that you do have, it is imperative that you start piecing those together because you'll start forming a picture of who you are. That's very important. But more importantly, you will start forming a picture for yourself, your children, of who you were before your identity was taken away from you by whites. So a lot of families right now, they can only recall their existence of their family. They only have pieces to the puzzle of maybe 50 pieces of a 10,000-piece puzzle. So to them, the history of black people only started in 1800 with their great-great-grandparents, or it only started for some who consider themselves even conscious. It only started in 1619, or you'll hear people talk about it started in 1614. That's like having only 100 pieces. You consider yourself conscious, but you only have 100 pieces of a 10,000-piece puzzle. Your host, Nita Black, signing off. Thank you for listening.